over the weekend, we told you, he told you, I told you, everyone really told you that Errol Spence taking on Shawn Porter was one not to miss. You had Spence, this great at welterweight, maybe pound for pound great, taking on a bull in a china shop in Shawn Porter, and oh my God, did this deliver. Easy candidate for fight of the year. Frankly, an all-time classic insofar as that division is concerned. Brian Campbell, you were there live in LA. What's the story of the fight?
The story of the fight is, let's not forget, when this fight is booked, everyone's like, I need to see this because we've never seen Spence against this crazy style against an elite fighter. But Luke, something happened on the way there. Suddenly the Vegas Sharps are telling you Spence is a minus 900 favorite, and you have Spence at every turn, which we talked about last week, predicting I will easily knock out this guy. Nobody told Shawn Porter that in the end, and what you had was a great pay-per-view fight in which both guys went after it. Luke, we're just coming off the Mayweather pay-per-view era, where you get big shows, but then you get defensive showcases. This were two guys who were forced, because of the style that Shawn Porter set and the pace, to go after it, and you had an exciting fight. And the end-all takeaway is, this is almost a moral victory for Shawn Porter. Almost. This was his best performance in his career, in a loss, though, in which he pushed a guy in Errol Spence who's showing you up to this point, along with Terrence Crawford, all-time great potential, right? All-time great to be a face of this era, and he made him work in a style, pace, and distance he didn't want to for 12 full rounds. Now, in the end, just like in his last fight, when Errol Spence outboxed Mikey Garcia for 12 rounds to prove a point, Spence proves another point here, that he can fight another man's style, that he can go in that trench for 12 rounds. But don't miss the overall storyline here. Even though Porter lost, he forced one of the greats, Spence, to fight an uncomfortable style the entire fight. Spence was never able to discipline him, slow him down, and basically, as a ring general, create control of the fight. Credit to Spence, that 11th round knockdown was huge on my card. That pushed that in Spence's direction to get a win, 114, 113. Judges had a little bit, in the other direction for Spence. But in the end, it's survive and advance because Porter made it a hellacious night. And Luke, he didn't do it the old Porter way, which is reckless all the time. Did you see the way he set up his attacks with smart feints, with smart footwork?
Angle change.
He always kept Spence guessing.
Yeah. To me, it's like, is that the fight that Spence said that was going to happen? Like when he was talking about what this fight was going to be and what he was going to prove, did he say it was going to look like that? Never in a million years. If you just zoom out, imagine you had, how's your vision? Is it good? Can you see 2020?
Fantastic.
So I got
20/10 in one eye.
Do you, is that right? Okay, you're a mutant. That's fine. At 2020, I looked at TV. Imagine you had blurry vision and you just saw them kind of fighting the way that they were. You would say, like I always tell folks, for example, when you watch a Floyd fight, it often is a little bit slow, it's methodical, it's taking place at a distance. The one with Cotto a little bit different, and certainly against Maidana a little bit different too. But in general, why do his fights look that way? Because he makes them look that way. The complexion of the fight often tells you who's winning, which is interesting because the overall complexion of this fight had a Shawn Porter fight written all over it. It was a goddamn brawl at times, right? It was amazing. And there were times where Spence was covering up and ducking for dear life.
He looked not hurt, but he looked uncomfortable. He looked uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable at times, dude. So here's what I took away from this fight. One, Spence is the real deal Holyfield, right? To be able to fight a guy like that who was putting it on you.
Best night of his life.
Scoring that 11th round knockdown. And now there's a question about where he goes from here, which we'll talk about in just a second. But for that moment in time, you thought to yourself, dude, he can fight smart Mikey Garcia and then brawling Shawn Porter, and he can come out the other end not looking too scuffed up all that much. On the other hand, Shawn Porter proved, okay, is he the best welterweight in the world? He's not. But you better be, and you better be on your A game when you are the best if you're going to take on Shawn Porter. He is a tough out for anybody.
Yeah, you let him in your house, somebody's getting knocked up. He's going to get inside.
You have to be on your P's and Q's the whole time. And dude, you're right. I had it 115, 112. But to me, it was like I think I was like 9 rounds in. I think Porter had it winning at that point.
Well, it was one of those where you're literally judging Porter's control of the pace and the fight and the dictation of the terms against Spence landing cleaner counter shots.
Right.
And I think sometimes people, when they're scoring fights, especially at home and they're drinking and they're not paying attention as much, you only score the scoring blows. If you are making another man fight your crazy style and he doesn't want to, that's a big part of winning a round.
But if he can do that and then drop you in the 11th and then find other sort of key, precise moments to land.
That's where he proved he's the real.
Exactly. That was just that extra edge. So now the question goes to who is next. And you had Danny Garcia in there. I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, here's the problem. The fans are really upset about this.
Well, hold on. Let me give you my sense of things. Because I think it was after the Garcia fight, if I'm not mistaken, that Spence called out Pacquiao. And
Yes.
Pacquiao
was in the ring as well.
That's right. And Pacquiao just had his big win over Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman has his hand messed up. They can't make that fight anyway. So you're like, oh, man, that'd be great. Pacquiao seems to look revived. You know, when there may or may not be VADA testing, I'm not saying one way or the other. Frankly, I don't really care one way or the other. But let's be honest. He looked great against Thurman, okay? And he still has the ability to pull big numbers on PBC. That is the fight to make. I think you would agree. I would like to see that one in a perfect world, or maybe the Bud Crawford one. But here we go. Pacquiao, I don't know that he is available for the moment. And then on the other side, you have Bud Crawford, who is with Top Rank. Now, I know they got this fight happening between Ortiz and Wilder and saying, oh, if we come together for this.
Fury Wilder in February.
What am I saying? If we come together for this, we can just make things happen. But the reality is there are more welterweights in the PBC stable. They don't actually need to make that happen in the same way that they kind of need to make Fury and Wilder too. So it looks like Danny Garcia is the guy. Why should fans... Well, how should fans feel about it?
Fans are upset because it seemed predetermined, and it was, right? Spence wins, PBC, Al Heyman, and Fox suddenly has Danny Garcia, who was on the announce desk above the arena, suddenly right there.
Turtleneck and all.
And they sort of said, matter of fact, you get the next fight. The problem with that is he just lost to Spence last October in that vacant title bout, to Porter, in which Porter wins the WBC title and gets into this fight. Since then, he's bounced back with a nice knockout of Adrian Granados. But he hasn't seemed to, in this season, do enough to earn it. The reason why I'm not upset is a couple things. One, it'd be a great stylistic fight because Danny Garcia is an elite boxer with a great chin, and he has the type of power, specifically in that left hook, to counter you, that it's going to be an interesting, tense chess match the whole time. And number two, I've been talking about this welterweight era being potentially historic, okay? Not better than the four kings of the 80s, and then they all moved up to middleweight, the Hagler, the Hearnses, the Durans, and all that. But if we look back on this era and say that we had Spence, Crawford, and then a bunch of great B-plus fighters like Thurman, like Porter, like Danny Garcia, and they all ended up fighting each other, well, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this than Spence taking some mandatory against somebody else. He's potentially now going to be in 3 pay-per-views as an A-side in less than a year. And regardless of how this pay-per-view scores on the buy rate with Porter, I think the way Spence fought, he's going to be just fine as a brand moving forward as one of the most important PBC fighters because he went out there and had to fight to win it. And in the end, yeah, people will pay for personalities, but they want to pay for something that's going to guarantee a win. The reason why I'm not so upset about Pacquiao is I have my own sort of thoughts in my head, okay? He's being linked for a Mikey Garcia potential pay-per-view at the early of next year. You can like that fight, you can hate that fight, that's fine. I'm wondering if he wasn't in the ring there because maybe we'll get something called Maypac 2 next year. And I'm not saying this with inside info. I'm saying it kind of makes sense, right? There's enough smoke here and enough money to be made. Maybe it would be smart not to throw Pacquiao right at Spence if you're booking the whole damn territory as a whole and maybe set up that fight. And then if we can get something like Spence Crawford in 2021, which the head of Fox Programming, who talked to the reporters over the weekend, said, we'd love to do that. You could end up winning out in the end. This is boxing. It's not the organized NBA playoffs, unfortunately, where the best is just going to keep climbing and fight the best. But if you sit here and say you don't like Spence, Danny Garcia as a fight, I'm gonna question you on that.
It's not that I dislike it. It's that if the real claim to why we should do it is for historical completeness, that's not a bad argument, but that's not an argument why I should take Danny Garcia's chances seriously, right? I took Porter's chances seriously. I would take Pacquiao's chances seriously. I don't take his chances seriously. I'm not suggesting to you that Garcia is some kind of scrub. He is not, right? I was there when he fought Lucas Matisse, when Matisse was in his power punching prime, and he beat him. And his dad, Angel Garcia, let the whole room know about it. I remember that quite distinctly, right? But at the same time, it's like, dude, however good Garcia is, Spence is a little bit better. I'm not suggesting he's unbeatable.
Well, look, he pushed Keith Thurman to the limit in basically a split decision.
Yeah, but that was Thurman. Now we're now saying was on the decline.
No, not at that time. That was before the injury. That was
the beginning of the chapter of his alleged decline.
Well, it was the last fight before the 2-year break and the injuries.
Right.
Okay, and it was a pretty damn good fight.
Okay, when people bring up his decline, they talk about the Danny Garcia fight. Whether that is fair or whether that is not fair, they do. They don't say all of a sudden, oh, he beat Danny Garcia, and it's only a function of the time off.
I'm just saying, Danny Garcia is pretty damn elite. He doesn't have the welterweight resume, even though he's held a world title that he had at 140, but he's pretty damn elite. And I'm not trying to sit here as company man of anybody and say, well, this is fine, this is how boxing does it. Is Spence Pacquiao the next logical step if you're trying to find out who the best welterweight in the world is? Yes, but I also am beaten down and understand how the boxing business works and promotion works and network works and setting up big fights. And Spence, Danny Garcia, to me, that's a damn good fight.